What's up guys, back with another train log and Q&A. It was a great week, week 10, 2 weeks away from testing my max. So I want to talk about preparing for a max. Because a lot of lifters end up making some bad decisions leading up to a test that lead to them leaving weight in the tank from what they could have hit if they did things properly. So this video will be sort of a guide to maxing out. So first off, let's talk about programming and peaking into a test. This is basically manipulating things to make us as strong as possible on the day. Peak in theory is based on the fitness fatigue model. How much weight we can lift is our fitness, which you can think of as our baseline strength, minus our fatigue. For example, if we have 300 pounds worth of baseline strength and 20 pounds worth of fatigue, we can lift 280 pounds. So the idea is we want some combination of maximizing strength and minimizing fatigue to lift as much as possible. There are many ways to do this, but I think they can briefly be summed up in two methods. The first I would call the supercompensation method. Here we push ourselves really hard, harder than we could sustain for the long term. We do this for about 2 to 4 weeks. We can only do this for a short phase of peaking. The idea is we're going to maximize stimulus to maximize our underlying strength. Now this also causes a lot of fatigue. So then we tend to pull back our training load heavily to also cut fatigue. The upside of this method is it can boost your baseline strength a ton if you do it very well. You can lift a lot more than normal. The downsides are a couple. First, it's hard to do right. Either you may not cut enough fatigue and end up feeling really beat up and weak on the day. This is especially true the stronger or more susceptible to fatigue you are. It's easy to overdo things and end up just burning out. Now it's also easy, even if we do cut the fatigue, to end up detraining and cutting your baseline strength. When you jack up your stimulus at the start, your body gets used to it somewhat. So it also ends up detraining quickly when you cut the stimulus to cut fatigue. That's really the art of peaking. You're trying to cut fatigue without detraining. Way too many people end up taking complete rest, which is the stupidest thing you can do. You get out of practice with technique really easily this way, so rather than complete rest, I usually end up doing a real easy day, something like 60% for a 2x2 on squats and deadlifts, and a 3x2 at around 70% on bench. Now the other method is the one that I'm going to use, as I've found that as I've gotten stronger in an absolute sense, I can't handle supercompensation as well. This is just more of an RTS style peak I call it. I call it that because it's similar to what Mike Tushurer of Reactive Training Systems does. The basic idea is with our program, we have found a general formula that works well for us. It makes us stronger, so we don't do a period of increased stimulus, because we don't want to change the stimulus at all. We just do a slight deload into the test to cut fatigue and max out like that. We should see a small boost or no change, just as strong as we usually are, which is fine. The idea being we should have gotten stronger over the training cycle, and we're going to lift more. Now, let's talk about attempts on the day. Let's say your max on the day is going to be 320 pounds if everything goes perfect. We don't want to go too heavy and fatigue ourselves before max. If we do 315 pounds, that would probably be too fatiguing to hit our true max of 320 pounds afterwards. We also don't want to go too light because it can be hard to judge our true top end, and also not get us as acclimated to the heavier weights. So if we do 295 pounds then jump to 325 pounds, we miss by just 5 pounds, and again, we're probably going to be too fatigued to hit our true max. Or even if we jump right to 320 pounds from 295 pounds, it might throw us off doing that big of a jump as we can't handle it under those circumstances. So to avoid either extreme, I usually advise doing our last two jumps at 4 to 7.5% of our estimated max. More on how to estimate that later. Where we fall in that range will depend on how fatigued we find we get on each lift. So for example, a big arch bencher with a real short range of motion, they can probably handle going on the low end of that range of percentages since they don't get as fatigued with a rep. So they can go heavier and benefit from being acclimated more to the heavier weight. Now compare that with somebody who's, say, a short arm conventional puller with a history of back issues. They're going to be more worried about managing fatigue from their extra range of motion and the tissues that are more sensitive. They'll benefit from bigger jumps. So these jump sizes both have their upsides and downsides. You can have to find what works best for you on each lift. For me on bench, I'm definitely more on the smaller jump side, but on squats and deadlifts, I definitely need to air bigger. Now, how do we estimate what we can hit on the day? Well, this is why I'm big on tracking your own data. Compare speeds of different weights versus your past cycles. I've been doing that in side-by-side comparisons with my singles each week during this training program, comparing it to past cycles and see what I eventually max out at to get an estimate of what I'm going to be able to do. You can also do rep maxes or RPE of a heavy single and see what percentage you usually hit on these afterwards when testing your max. You could use a calculator online, but it's better to use your own historical data if you have that. Use that as an estimate and then make small adjustments to how we're going to feel on the day as well. I always say air conservative too. It's better to make sure you hit a weight and secure a PR than overshoot the mark. That's why it's important not to get too locked into certain numbers. Be ready to adjust how you feel on the day. Don't let your ego take over. Again, if we say the max we could hit on the day in ideal circumstances is 320 pounds, but we let our ego get in the way and go for 330, well, we're probably going to be too fatigued from that failure to actually hit 320 afterwards, so we're going to lift even less than we were capable of. Now, let's talk about some things with recovery and nutrition. I've said before, virtually all of recovery comes down to the basics. Protein, calories, sleeping long enough and with decent sleep hygiene. Most other things from here are going to provide greatly diminishing returns, and sometimes are just snake oil relying on placebo effects. Most won't be worth the time and energy of actually using them because of the stress, and it can hurt your recovery. Which reminds me, manage stress as well before your test, do some things that relax you, and cut off stressors. Consider quitting your job or dropping out of school. We want to focus on important things here like hitting a bench PR. I do recommend eating lots in the days before the test to fuel you. You should probably be in a bit of a surplus if you can. Now, cutting for meat is a whole nother topic in terms of how you need to refuel. This is assuming you aren't cutting. You don't actually need anything special on the day itself. Things like blood sugar and electrolytes, assuming you aren't at a fasted level, don't really affect strength that much. So just make sure you eat and drink something beforehand so you aren't hungry or thirsty while testing. Maybe bring something along with you if you're going to have a long day of testing all 3 lifts, just a little candy or something to snack on. I recommend something you know won't upset your stomach, no reason to risk it on the day. And in terms of warm-ups, I think you should just do what you normally do before workout. Don't change variables and risk throwing yourself off before the test. So that's basically it, guys, my protocol on maxing out. Let me know if you have any more questions below. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And once again, thanks for watching.